Now, let's get on to the Scrub Strap Spotlight. Let's bring in our guest, Jared.
Here he is.
Hey, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. I know you've been dying to get on here to talk about this.
Absolutely. Quick introduction. My name is Jared Jones. I'm the founder, owner, and president of an organization called Scrub Scraps Beginners Boxing League. Scrub Scraps is the world's only legal beginners boxing league and the country's only alternative treatment-based boxing program.
So start off here. Tell us how you started this and why you started this. And if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't necessarily for the best reasons right off the bat.
No, not at all. It started with a bigger kid bullying a smaller kid that I thought if they boxed would be a pretty close fight. Ends up it was. But most of it for me, I have high functioning autism. So there's like this, there's kind of social barriers that I struggle with. And I noticed that when it came to aggression and toughness, that there was, I take everything real literally, you know? So all of that stuff didn't have a fit for me if we weren't sure. Like, how do we know this guy walking around and being the toughest guy in the room is the toughest guy in the room? You can show me better than you can tell me. And I didn't have it in me to say that. But I decided if there was just a way to do that, that it would kind of dull that aggression. I would deal with less of that if there was an opportunity. So I got gloves, I got helmets, I kind of put all those things in place so that when people come over my house, they talk to each other with respect, or they really have to show, like Miles said, everybody's armed at the gun range. And nobody's really spouting off because everybody's armed. Charles says we all know how big our thing is, so we don't feel like we have to do that as people do in other situations. So really for me, it was like the ultimate equalizer for that social problem I was trying to adapt to and deal with. And some of it was just being bullied. When I started boxing at 14 and realized I could have beat up most of my bullies, that those kids couldn't fight, they didn't know how to fight, I was shocked. I was shocked and appalled. And that was the beginning of Scrub Scraps, you know, that everybody should have that. If we all had that there, we'd have less of the other stuff.
When did you realize or notice that you had kind of created something special, something that could be used in a rehabilitation sense?
I think it was about 2008 or 2009. We started in 2004, so we're about 4 or 5 years in, and it was after a training session. We did round robin sparring. So one person is in there with all the other 4 people, and then whoever was last with that person gets 5 rounds, and the last person, so that you're wearing each other down, you know? You're getting a fresh guy every 3 minutes and there's no break. So you've just been in there 25 minutes with 5 different people. And we did that and around and hours go by, you know, and then we're sitting in the garage afterward. Chris Mosconi, I call him Dizzle, the vice president, sitting there with me. And there's 5 or 6 guys there. And these are some of the hardest guys you would meet and in a driveway in Mansfield, you know? And they all were crying and sharing like the darkest parts of themselves. There was this, we were so exhausted and we had exposed ourselves to each other. And we were all so vulnerable that these guys that had never talked to anybody like that, all of a sudden they were all crying and hugging. And there was this thing happening. And I sat in the garage with Dizzle after everybody left for hours, and he said, it never occurred to me that the demographics are almost all people dealing with trauma. That if I say, who wants to punch somebody or get punched in the face, that the people that raise their hand are all the people that are dealing with some kind of trauma. That makes sense to them for a reason. And he looked up at me and said, we get the school shooters. And that was one of those moments for me that was like, he's right. We have this thing that the kid that could potentially go shoot up the school, we have an extracurricular activity that they'll volunteer for. They don't want to do your paint nights. They don't want to do your basket weaving. But we built something that they'll come out and volunteer for. And then we can attach this part to it. And it was about 6 months later, March 13th, I woke up with Cuddle the Bear, and it's likely my greatest thought in my life. And yeah, the rest is pretty much history.
Maybe real quick for anybody who doesn't know the Cuddle the Bear philosophy, maybe just kind of give us a brief.
It's based heavily on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is a pyramid structure that show that basically you need the bottom level satisfied and you work your way up. So the biggest thing for me at that point, the easiest way to describe it was, if you're chasing a bear in the woods, you have to have some very serious things going wrong. You're either hungry enough that you're trying to eat the bear, you're cold enough that you're trying to inhabit the bear, because the lowest level of that hierarchy is food, water, warmth, and rest. If you don't have all of those things, you will sacrifice anything above it. The second level is safety and security. So in chasing the bear, you're sacrificing your safety and security for food, water, warmth, and rest. Right? So you need to have the bottom level satisfied. Now, the third one is personal relationships and trust. So I thought I would be a personal psychologist. I thought I would be a therapist, and I'd be able to talk to people and help people. And at some point I realized people dealing with trauma, they don't have food, water, warmth, rest, safety, and security satisfied. So how on earth are they going to build a meaningful, trusting relationship with a psychologist? They can't. They don't have the foundation for that. So my hands are tied, and I can only help people who have enough food, water, warmth, and rest, and safety and security. And how many of those people are coming out for therapy? I can only help the people who don't need my help. So you will never get lonely enough to try to cuddle the bear. You will never lay on the couch and try to talk to the bear. That intimate relationship is outside of your wheelhouse if you're not eating enough. You might try to eat the bear. You might try to inhabit the bear. Otherwise, your safety and security is going to trump everything else on that list. And so when you get in there, it opens up that trauma. You're reacting. Instead of thinking about what you're supposed to do next, you're just reacting. And that's the thing that will make you chase the bear, but it's the same thing that will keep you in bed all day. It's the same thing that will make you cut yourself. It's the same thing that will make you drink or use drugs or just make that snap decision. Because people that dealt with trauma like that, we rely on our instincts. Our instincts keep us alive. Our instincts tell us, go get the bear, because that's the only way to eat. And we listen to our instincts because we eat. Because it gives us the food, water, warmth, rest, safety, and security we need, like animals, like like cavemen. We're gonna get those things if we have to eat each other. Look at any situation human beings were in where they had to eat one another to survive. They did. They did every single time except for once. So you're over 99% of the time people will do that. You have the conversation, hey, would you do that? People say no. And why would people say they would never eat another human being? Because they've had all those other rows satisfied. Joe, when I punched you in the head, you said things slowed down for you. And you started getting calculated and trying to dissect a way for that not to happen again. And when we were done, you told me that, and I cried. And I said, there is scrub scraps, Joe. That doesn't happen for everyone. You have dealt with your trauma to a point that when things hit you, you don't just fight back. You don't just use drugs or deal with it some inappropriate way. You stop, you slow it down, and you say, I don't want that to happen again. But the people that walk in and want to fight, they don't have that. I trigger something inside of them, and then I say, there's a better way. And I teach them how to slow it down like you were able to slow it down, like most people on those third and fourth steps of that hierarchy are able to. That is an impossibility for the people who walk into my gym.
Jared, I remember it wasn't the first time we met. I remember we went to Connecticut School Broadcasting together. I remember the first week we were just, it was mostly on the TV side. So we were with Walter, and we would talk a little bit about fights. And then I remember when we went to Joe's class, we were doing some radio stuff, and Joe said, "Introduce yourself, say something interesting about yourself," or something like that. Jared said, "Hi, I'm Jared Jones, and I run a fight club." And that was the wildest thing. I was like, "What?" And then the next day, he comes in with like this big packet of like a letter to the U.S. Boxing Commission. And you've been fighting really hard since it got shut down to get it backing up. And I know you're getting closer day by day. What was that fight like to get Scrub Scraps legitimized?
Damn.
He's on the ropes right now. This is.
I've been talking a lot about that with Dizzle because there was a point where our social media following started to really blow up. There was something viral going on with Scrub Scraps, and I had a lawyer call me and tell me everything we were doing was illegal. And I was ready to pin myself to the cross because I knew I was doing something good. And Dizzle started backing away from it. My best friend started, trying to talk sense into me. And it wasn't working. I was like, even if I get arrested, worst case scenario, they charge me, they try to give me 800 years, and people will show up and explain how I've been doing this good thing, and it's form over substance. And it's an argument we can win. And he said, all those people chanting and holding signs aren't going to be there. I know you like to think that, but I'll be there crying with your wife while they take you away. And if you're going to keep doing this thing, you're going to have to do it without me. And I trusted that he wouldn't have done that to me, to our thing, without knowing that it was dangerous and there was a better way. And he did that for me. And I look back at that part now, and I told him the other day, I hate saying this as a man, because there's no way for me to know how it would feel. But I go back to that night, and off the top of my head, I said to him, I imagine that's how a woman would feel after an abortion. I had life, I had this thing, and then it was just gone. I was up all night sitting in the garage, thinking about how I was going to shut this thing down and survive it, and whether it was ever going to come back again. And Dizzle told me, you're the Tom Brady. You're the Muhammad Ali of this. We're down now. It's late in the third quarter, and we're down 28-3, but you're the guy I want in there. You come back to the corner, I'm going to work on your cuts. I'm going to give you some water, but I'm going to send you back out there because you're the guy that can win this fight. He's the only person you could take away, and this doesn't get done the way that it does. I love you, Chris.
I think he would say the same thing. Well, he actually did say that to me yesterday. I actually talked to Diz on the phone yesterday. We actually were talking about that, how instrumental you are and how you love to credit everybody else, because that's the kind of guy that you are. Listen, now that you're totally on the ropes here to Tierville, let me ask you this, because the story you might have just told might have been the greatest success story. Obviously, this thing's been approved, and we're in the launch process now to get Scrub Scraps, now that it's legal and legitimized, up all over the world. Now, who is your best individual success story? And if you want to start crying first and then answer, that's fine. Or you want to answer and then cry, whichever works best. But I know we've talked to a lot of these fellas and ladies who have come through there. I'm curious who you personally believe was your biggest success story And again, not from a fighting standpoint, but from a who did you help the most?
Well, I'm going to go with Wes only because you guys saw Miles. You guys met Miles. A lot of struggles when he was younger, asthma, Tourette's. And the moment with his father coming over and saying, you built a foundation, a platform for stuff that I always wanted to see my son in the light that you made here. So we also had Pax on. That would be one of the top three. And she went from very, very anxious and depressed to, working on a PhD at Purdue. But we had both of them on. Wes, he didn't say much when he first got there. Kind of a loner. I don't want to get into, what disorders I think he may or may not have, but could be hard to talk to at times. And he's the strange kid. Like, I'm not going to pull any punches. I don't mind him hearing me say that. He's a little off. And when you meet him, you're like, this guy's a little off. And then he started showing up to every single training session and working on my car just to be there and cleaning out the bramble in my yard just for the no, it's a good workout. Wes, hey, the things you don't support, they go away, he said to me once and handed me $20. It's the only money I've ever taken for scraps. He wasn't going to let me give it back to him. The things you don't support disappear. And I never want this to disappear. It gave this kid who everybody looked at as the outsider and everybody thought was the loner an opportunity for people to cheer for him and for him to be successful and for him to then even train other people. There were people asking him for his advice for their fights. This is the kid that was shadow boxing, talking to himself in the corner the first time that everybody was like, who the hell is that guy? And now they're asking him for advice. So the growth that I watched in Wes it's just immeasurable. And he said that. And then he brought his little brother in, Noah, who we couldn't find anybody for, and I ended up boxing with. And when I said, hey, there's not really anybody here, I would box with you, Noah. Really? I'll never forget the look on this kid's face. You just found out a kid with 20, 30 years of experience is going to box you in front of 100 people in your first fight ever. And he was so excited that he was going to get a chance to do it. And Wes walked over at the end and he said, I saw things in my little brother that I've never seen before. There's a fighter inside of my little brother that I've never met. We lost our father. We lost our mother. I've raised him myself. And he showed me things today that I've never seen before. Wes and Noah, yeah, they've only ever had each other. And I introduced him to a world where there were other people that cared about you. So yeah, I'd say if there's one, it's not like Dane's story, but he works now over at the cigar shop. He has a job. Full time. And for Wes, it's not the heights you attain, it's the distance you travel. And that's why Wes is my favorite story, because everybody came in thinking he was going to lose every fight. And when he started winning, they were shocked. And he won his last 4 fights in a row. Like, now people can't beat Wes because he just trained and got so fixated on it. This is the kid I told you about that my sister yelled to. Do you guys remember that story? In his first fight, he's sitting there and he's fighting and he's doing his thing and he gets hit in the nuts like 30, 45 seconds into the fight. We have a break for him. He stretches out. He's good to go. And this other kid's bigger, trying to kill him. Youngblood. Really letting his hands go bop, bop, bop. And my sister yells, let's go, Wes. And he stopped and looked over at her. And Youngblood shocked him with a punch. And I couldn't figure out what happened. Why are you listening to the crowd? What's going on with Wes? And after the fight, the kid walks over to me and he says, when I was a little kid, I was on a soccer team and some of the other kids got hurt. So I had to be on the team. And then I was in the back near the goal. And one of the kids came in with the ball and I kicked the ball away. And somebody said, Let's go, Wes. And then he walked away from me. And it took me a second to figure out that he was explaining to me what happened. That this 34-year-old man hadn't had anybody cheer for or celebrate him since he was 8. And when he heard my sister say, "Let's go, Wes," he stopped and turned, and time froze for him, and he went back to being that little kid and being celebrated and having done something good. Can you imagine? Let's go, Joe. I do that every weekend.
Yeah. Jared, you got to know what question's coming. What's the difference between Jared before Scrub Scraps and Jared after Scrub Scraps?
Even knowing that was coming, it's still hard. Jared before Scrub Scraps didn't have any way to belong. I didn't fit in. I didn't have friends. I didn't feel like there were people I could talk to. I didn't want your fucking therapy sessions. There weren't extracurricular activities for me where I wasn't bullied. I stood out from everybody else because I didn't talk or think the same way they did. And in the ring, we were all the same. And there is no Jared after Scrub Scraps. There is only Scrub Scraps after Jared.
I love that. I love that. And Jared, like, I can't say enough good things about you. I remember when you and I first talked about starting this show, we did a little test episode where we were just talking about, it was right after Anthony Joshua got beat by Ruiz. And we were just talking about fights. And then we went into Joe's office at CSB and to ask Joe, hey, we've got an idea for this podcast. And then you sat down and you got into Jared mode. You got into Flurry Jared mode where you were talking and you're so passionate about Scrub Scraps. And then I'm like, okay, this is the show. This is what, fights are one thing, but Jared doing this is something different. And that's what I knew that's what was going to make that was going to make Throwing Jabs different than any other boxing show. And it's because how great you are. Like we talked about with Dana White, he doesn't give a shit about his best cash cows. You give a shit about the people no one gives a shit about. And that's what Scrub Scraps was based off of. And I love you, brother.
I love you too, Jace. Thank you, man.
Throwing jabs, always full send. Here we go again. Jared, Joe, and Jace, Clovercrest, top 3 corner man, punching in with a puncher's chance. We find a way to win. The main event, lock it in every Saturday at 10. The overhand is out of hand when it comes to fisticuffs. Slide a hand on the undercard, you'll never see the punch. Uppercut, got you missing weight, feet are stepping late. Keep your guard up, feeling faint from a feint. Take a stand and eight, then retaliate. Put up your duke, stick and move, bob and weave. Don't lose hope against the ropes, there's always an escape. Never stay down. One more round, bells ringing, counter punch with your chin tucked and go down swinging. We bringing crosses with no worship, hooks with no verses, combinations with no locks. When you feel the flurry, it's curtains. From Scrub Scraps to fight stats, relax if you want the facts, cause the best combat podcast is Throwing Jabs.